Conservative.
Christian. Mother. Wife.
Air Force veteran.
Gun rights advocate.
This is Stacy on the Right. Here's your host, Stacy Washington.
That's right. We're rocking and rolling here at SiriusXM. Thanks for being with us tonight. We have lots of programming and great news and information we're going to share. Right now, we're welcoming into the program our next guest. We have Bautista Vivanco, Young Voices contributor. He holds a BA in Political Science and Economics from Winthrop University. Bautista, welcome.
Thank you very much, Stacy. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. So you have a new article over at Real Clear Politics, and we don't have the specific link to the article, so tell us what you're writing about there.
Absolutely. As we have heard with the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill, and even in the previous to the bill being approved, there was a lot of complaining, especially from state officials, on how their states would be impacted by these quote-unquote cuts to Medicaid. Many, including Gavin Newsom, the governor of Kentucky, talked about how Medicaid is vital to their state economies. But I essentially, in the article, I talk how, well, every single cent that the federal government takes back in funding for Medicaid, these governors can just increase their taxes and then just pay for it themselves. So if it is so vital and important, they can just keep on funding it themselves.
If the Medicaid spending is vital and important, well, Medicaid was meant to be, in the Medicaid creation of Medicaid, it was meant to be a state-by-state type of a program, so each state had their own individual Medicaid program. The way it's being done now is actually not the way that the founders of that program meant it to be run.
Yes, you are correct. Since its inception, which was, I think it was 60 years ago yesterday, funny enough, since its inception, the size of the funding that states have been providing has been getting lower and lower and lower, and the federal government has been chipping in more and more of the funding for this program. So you are correct with that.
So the answer is not to have the program be something completely different than what they intended when they created it. The answer is to have the 50 individual Medicaid programs so that the different states can do them in ways that make sense for them.
Well, precisely. And ultimately, that's also one of the issues that I touch on my piece, is that if you think about it, Medicaid is a rather undemocratic program as it is. Because since the federal government is paying most of the money to fund this program, state officials, they don't have to be held responsible for the benefits that they want to promise. And so ultimately, if they don't want to raise the taxes to pay for the program themselves, and they just want to complain about these cuts, that just means that they don't want to raise the taxes to pay for it, which means that current Medicaid spending levels are not as popular as the taxes needed to maintain current Medicaid spending levels.
Well, the current level of Medicaid spending is inflated by individuals who are on it, who are, they're either double dipping because they have employer sponsored care, or they are simply able-bodied. And a lot of people who wouldn't normally be on Medicaid jumped onto it during COVID because they were forced to stay home. They were in lockdowns. They needed health care. They needed help. So they jumped onto whatever program they could get onto. And now we have those same individuals who need to be removed, not because we don't want to help people, but because if you're able-bodied, you shouldn't be on Medicaid.
Yes, which is precisely why whenever you poll individuals and ask them how do they feel about work requirements in Medicaid, that is an extremely popular proposition for most individuals, especially once you talk to people about the real scope and size of waste, fraud, and abuse in these programs. I think it was only a couple of months ago that some very interesting people at the Paragon Institute, a think tank, found out that over the last 10 years, Medicaid fraud was over $1 trillion. That's a trillion with a T.
So we want to eliminate some of that fraud. we simply have to get rid of it. Yeah. So what do you recommend? I know you're writing about this, but there has to be something you're thinking would be better.
Well, I do recognize that these changes to the program are definitely a step in the right direction. The problem is that they are not really. I do believe that we should go a little further. Earlier, I referred to these cuts in quotation marks because they're not really cutting. Medicaid spending by the federal government is just changing from growing at a 4% rate every year to now growing at a 2.3%. So we're not really cutting the program. We're just shoveling money into it with a smaller shovel. So if you were to ask me, the best way in which we could address this would be to make Medicaid a zero growth program in which the amount that is dedicated right now remains stabilized and it stops growing, since the issue with Medicaid is that it's been growing faster than the U.S. economy, and that is just simply unsustainable.
So I couldn't agree with you more. First of all, the idea that we just kind of leave it, kind of just say, okay, the federal partnership for Medicaid with the states, we need to continue to fund that, and so we will therefore, basically just let it grow at whatever pace it's going to grow at. Just whatever, just let it go as fast as possible. Oh, yeah. I mean that's ludicrous, and we don't have any other area in which we engage in that way. Like personally in our budgets, we don't allow our budget to grow out of control without a consideration of spending or whether or not money is being wasted.
Absolutely not.
And we certainly don't do that in business. In business, in fact, if you run a company that way, you're likely to be found to, of mismanagement and to lose your company or to be investigated. I mean, it's fraudulent to do that. But for the government, it seems not to be an issue.
Well, not at all, especially because it's very convenient for the people that are in charge to have it be this way. So going back to these state officials, one of the very tricky things with the way Medicaid is structured is that in some states and for some individuals, for every dollar that, let's say, the state of Kentucky pays or spends on Medicaid, the federal government will pay $9. So that if you were the governor of Kentucky, that means that you can say, hey, I am giving you, my constituents, $10 in political goodies, which is Medicaid insurance, while only taxing you $1. Don't you see how great this is? And so that just keeps on incentivizing more and more growth. And every time you want to touch that system and want to put a stick in that wheel, you have everybody jumping at you and telling you that it's going to be terrible for everybody and that the sky is going to start falling.
Well, we know the sky isn't falling. We know that able-bodied people are on Medicaid. They're on it, and they need to get off.
That is very true.
Yeah.
That is very true. At least they're, when in the next year, they're going to be able to keep these work requirements that are very popular with the American people. So I think, as I said previously, I think this is a step in the right direction.
So is there anything else that people need to know? I mean, obviously, we want to eliminate the fraud, waste, and abuse. We want to keep the program for people who need it. There are people who legitimately need access to this program. Anything else?
Yes. Well, a better way in which the government could provide assistance to these individuals that, as you said, they rightly need this program, is if instead of giving them Medicaid or the health insurance they receive through it, you were to give them cash, like in Social Security. There have been some really cool studies that showcase that on average, for every dollar that is spent on a Medicaid beneficiary, the beneficiary only gets 20 to 50 cents in real tangible benefits. So theoretically, you would be able to cut the entire budget of Medicaid in half give the rest of that money directly to the people, just like it works with Social Security, and they would receive and perceive the exact same amount of benefits. So it's a win-win just to the recipients, especially those that really, really need it, and also to the taxpayers.
Okay, so when you say give them cash to do what with? Mm-hmm. What would they be doing with the cash?
Well, they would be able to spend it in a way that suits them best, just like how it works with Social Security. Some of them would spend that on health insurance, others on receiving the care that they might need, whether it be the hospital or the physicians. Many might use that to buy food and feed their families. Health insurance is not necessarily the most important thing that someone that is disabled or below the poverty line or that is pregnant or with children might need. There are some things that are more important than that. And I think that it's up to the individuals to make that decision.
But we have other programs that you can get onto if you need to buy food.
That is very true. But the way that it currently works with the government, every time that the government spends $1 on Medicaid, the people really receive up to 50 cents of that dollar in real benefits. The other half goes to healthcare providers, the hospitals, insurance companies, doctors. So if you really want to have a program that is focused on trying to improve the lives of poor people, a better way to do that would be to give them the cash directly without these intermediaries.
Okay, so I was with you on the reforms until you start talking about putting in, cash for people to just basically spend on whatever they want. We already have a lot of cash transfers, a lot of payments that go to people who are living in poverty, and we do find that there is a bit of fraud there. People are using these programs, and especially the food stamp and WIC programming, where they basically sell the card, they sell the value of the card. They don't really have there's no fealty to it. They don't feel a responsibility to use that for the way that it was originally intended. So I think that same problem would persist with this program. If you're on Medicaid, you're probably getting food stamps as well. So there's no need to give cash.
Well, not necessarily. There are a lot of adults in Medicaid that don't necessarily qualify to obtain food stamps, many including, as you mentioned before, that they are in the wrong eligibility criteria because states don't really enforce their eligibility criteria very well. Now, what I was saying about providing them with cash instead of actually paying them with Medicaid, that was mostly an alternative to provide the same level of benefits that these people get, while also essentially cutting the budget of this program in half, which I think is the real issue that we have here, is that Medicaid is one of the driving forces to the federal deficit and thus the national debt. So I think it would be very important to address that, and one of the ways to do that would be to make it reduce its budget and then pay the beneficiaries the money in a way that that it will be consistent with that. But again, this is just an alternative, and as I previously said, I do think that the current work requirements that have been put in place are a good alternative, and that we can always go further.
Yeah, I think the key point to what you're sharing is that we may need some reforms, and those reforms might take a bit of a different, like they might appear differently than what we might traditionally have seen in the past. I'm actually okay with that. I'm okay with us doing something different if we feel that what we're currently doing isn't working, as long as there's some oversight to ensure that we're not encouraging and incentivizing, the fraud and the waste and the abuse. So,
well, absolutely, and I think I could not agree more with what you're saying. In fact, if Medicaid were to be a drug, it would not be approved by the FDA since it doesn't have enough evidence to to back it. There has not been any real evidence that it actually improves the health of the people receiving Medicaid. There are only 2 randomized control trials, which are the gold standard in life sciences, and that are used to validate whether drugs are effective or you're going to have side effects or are going to be problematic. The only 2 studies that have been done on Medicaid have proven no real meaningful results in the physical health of the individuals. So you're right.
Well, I have to tell you, the issue with not having anything that you can show for it, that you can say, people are better off, that also is something that, it should bring shame to us. We're pouring millions of dollars into programming that is, for some reason, not helpful. So that's the opposite of what we want.
I would say it's not only not helpful, it's also very distortive, because we're doing this in a way that we're not even financing it with current taxes. We're financing mostly with debt. And so eventually that is going to have to be paid back either by inflation or by increasing the taxes a lot. This year, I think that interest payments on the debt are about the same size of what we spend on national defense. And that's just going to keep on increasing, partly because of the expansion and the scope of these very, very large programs. I mean, we're talking here almost $1 trillion is going to Medicaid this year. So
that's crazy. $1 trillion. Woo!
Yeah, no, that is quite a lot. And as I said, it's going to continue to increase. It's just now with these work requirements and other restrictions, it's just going to increase at a lower rate. So, yeah, there's going to be more Medicaid in the coming years.
Yeah, we need reform. We absolutely need reform. I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. Your article, Bautista Vivanco, The Empty Outrage Over Medicaid Cuts, is at Real Clear Politics. Great article, lots to think about, well-researched. Thank you so much for bringing this to the program tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and God bless.
All right, God bless you too. Good to talk to you.